Hello there, everyone. This is Cynthia Clark, your palm reading expert and love compatibility coach with loveinyourhands.com. Today, we are going to be talking about archetypes. Specifically, we are going to identify what is an archetype. We're also going to look at an example of an archetype and how it actually shows up in your hands. And we're also going to be looking at how archetypes can help you in your love life, because of course I am passionate about helping you find and keep long-lasting love. And archetypes are a great way to actually go to a deeper level than just a superficial way of matching. So the first thing I want to talk about is just what is an archetype? Because a lot of people, maybe you've heard the word before, but you're not really sure what it's actually all about. So I did a little research. I went onto Wikipedia and I found out, and this was interesting to me. So hopefully you're one of these geeks like me. You like to know some history. But it actually came into the English language in the 1540s. It came from Latin and Greek terminology, and the translation is original pattern from which copies are made. Okay, so when you think about that, copies, okay, so we're looking at archetypes are a set of personality traits. Okay, in other words, they're copies. In other words, they come from somewhere. They come from the collective unconscious. And this was actually popularized by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. If you haven't studied him, he's quite fascinating. And when we think about this, it actually can show us in our hands, because our hands form their shape by the time you are 6 years old. So they've actually proven that we're completely in our subconscious minds, or you can think of the collective unconscious, from the time we're born to the time we're about 6 years old. So we don't get our hand shape until we're about 6 or 7 years old, when our higher brain states are actually forming. So when you think about this, you're building up this energy, you're building up these traits. Okay, so in other words, when you think about why do some people gravitate towards, being really social and chatty, and why do other people seem more shy and introverted? Why are some people interested in science and other people are more interested in the arts? This is not an accident. It's because of the energy and the information you pick up as a baby. And this is what I think of as the archetypes. You have a set of traits that you start collecting. You can think of it like, again, we go back to our definition, the original pattern from which copies are made. Okay, so you are this perfect little soul coming into this body, and you have these influences that are just going directly into your unconscious mind. So this is really how archetypes work. And by the time we get into our higher brain states, by the time we're about 6 years old, we are actually going to be impacted by that collective unconscious for the rest of our lives. And that's when our hand shape forms. So you may be wondering, where am I going with all this? But it's actually really cool. So bear with me. So I actually published a set of 22 archetypes in my book, Stories in Your Hands. So here's a copy of it right here. And you can access that on loveinyourhands.com if you're interested. I go through all 22 archetypes in my book. And I find it really interesting to look at the traits that come through these different hand shapes. So an example of an archetype? Okay, we're going to learn something new, hopefully, and maybe you have this archetype. We're going to look at the dreamer. Okay, so the dreamer is actually, looks like this hand right here. It's going to be somebody with long fingers and a long rectangular palm and a strong Apollo finger. Okay, so how do we measure that? All right, this is where I get out my trusty calipers. And you can measure your hand shape starting with your middle finger. Okay, take your middle finger, take the length of your middle finger and measure it relative to your palm. If your palm is, if your middle finger is 3/4 or longer relative to your palm, then that is an indication of long fingers. Otherwise, you have short fingers. Okay, so that's our first measurement. The next thing we look at is the length of the palm. So again, we just sort of take this, these calipers. We measure from the bottom of the middle finger to the wrist, and then we measure it relative to the width of the palm from the edge of the thumb to the edge. And if you have a rectangular palm, this is an example of the dreamer is what we're looking for. So long fingers, long palm, and then we look at the fingers. Okay, so each of the fingers represent a different aspect of yourself. And if your ring finger is longer than your index finger by 1/2 centimeter or more, then that's a strong finger. Okay, so Apollo is the one we're looking at. So again, this is the, if you want to take another look at the dreamer, we're looking for a water and Apollo type. Okay, so if you form this by the time you're 6 years old, what does it mean? And how does this help you in your love life? Okay, so I'm getting to that. First off, this type of hand shape is somebody who really represents someone who's open to new things. Okay, they're very flexible, they're adaptable, and they are not stuck in a set way of doing things. So if you go on a date with this person, for example, they probably are not going to have a preference over whether they want Chinese food or Italian. You're going to want to ask them, and they'll be like, "No, I could go either way. I could do whatever you want to do." That's the beauty of knowing your archetype and what is the influence behind it. And this is all subconscious. Remember, this comes from 5 months before you're born until you're about 6 years old is when you start developing this collective unconscious. So it's very cool. So let's take a look also at some examples. I wanted to show you some examples of this archetype of dreamer hands. So dreamers are really fun to be around, by the way. They tend to be, that spontaneous energy. They're just really fun people. So here are some examples of dreamer hands. Okay, as you can see, those long fingers, that long ring finger, and we've got a long palm. And here's also an example of a photograph of a dreamer archetype. Okay, so in relationships, this is where it gets really cool and interesting is you can learn who your not only your traits and who your like what you offer in a relationship. So this dreamer person, they can offer that spontaneous fun energy, that sort of inner child energy. They can help you to not take things too seriously, which this is not my archetype, so I could benefit from being around one because sometimes I take things too seriously. But it also helps you understand who your best match is. So when you know your archetype, you can also learn who your best match is. And in the case of the dreamer, their best match would be what we call the hermit archetype. And that would be somebody who's got a very different hand shape than them. You're always compatible, by the way, with the same hand shape that you have, but you're going to be best matched with a complementary energy, which in this case would be an earth hand, which is short fingers, and a square palm. And we're looking at that fire finger, so we want to match it up with an air finger, which is Mercury, the little finger. Okay, and that's the hermit archetype. So when you can understand these archetypes, it not only helps you in your love life, excuse me, but it also helps you in all of your relationships. And this can go across the board with professional relationships. It can also help you in friendships, and it can help you just understand the person that you are interacting with. It can help you with your family members. It can just help you understand them so much better and at such a deeper level, because we're going to that subconscious or unconscious level that when the person is, what are they motivated by? This is how you can find out. And there's so many details that are in the hands. This is just one aspect that I use in my analysis when I help people understand themselves. So I have actually set this up in a dating platform where you can go just find out your archetype, and then you can start to learn who your best matches are and really understand who your perfect partner is. Just go to loveinyourhands.com and join my Soulmate Connection membership. And it's totally free to start. So there's no obligation whatsoever in order to find out your archetype. So thank you so much for joining me today. Oh, by the way, I also wanted to talk a little bit about some famous dreamers. It was kind of fun because I've analyzed a lot of famous hands over the years. So some other famous dreamer archetypes include Mother Teresa. We've also got Marilyn Monroe. We've got Pierce Brosnan, and we have Heidi Klum. These all have that hand shape of the dreamer with the long fingers, long palm, and strong Apollo fingers. So I thought that would be kind of fun. And you can learn all about that too from my book, Stories in Your Hands. You can see who you might be like. So anyway, go find out your archetype and get started in finding a real connection. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful day, everyone.